Have you ever remembered a morning many years ago, more clearly than anything else in your life? Not because it's beautiful, but because after that, everything in your life is no longer the same. I'm only 6 years old. As a little girl who still hugged a stuffed bunny while sleeping, she had never known loss. That morning, my dad was making smiley face pancakes, his Sunday specialty. Mom was clearing the table and humming a song I don't remember the name of. Lily, little princess, come help me flip the cake, my father said, waving the flour shovel like a magic wand. I jumped off the sofa and ran into the kitchen with excitement. Then the cake shovel fell to the floor. Dad clutched his chest, his face contorted as if the whole sky was collapsing. Everything after that was just the sound of the ambulance siren, the hospital lights, and the sound of my mother crying wordlessly. In just one morning, I lost the gentlest man in the world. And from then on, my cozy house became an empty space, too large, too quiet, and too strange. In today's video, I want to tell you about the journey of a girl who was forgotten by her own family. A person who has lived his entire childhood in the shadow of bias and distorted expectations. A person spent his entire youth searching for a seemingly small thing, love and recognition from the mother. But sometimes, the only way to be loved is to learn to let go. Right here, you will follow Lily from an abandoned little girl to a woman strong enough to say, I can't stand it anymore. And that story ... might also be yours, or someone you once knew. Let's start where it all began, the morning it all changed. Below is the part 1. The morning that changed everything right according to the agreed outline. Keep the storytelling style warm and friendly, have specific examples, gentle lessons, and end with a smooth transition to the next section. There are memories that don't need photos, don't need diaries, don't need anyone to remind them, but are still as vivid in our minds as if they just happened this morning. For me, it was a Sunday morning in March, a long time ago. My dad, the warmest man I've ever known, was making smiley face pancakes in the small, sunny kitchen. That's his habit every weekend, baking and joking, sometimes making heart shapes, sometimes making funny faces that make me laugh like a child opening a Christmas gift. My mother was clearing the table while softly singing an old song whose melody I now only remember. The atmosphere at that time was filled with love and peace, a feeling that I have never fully regained in my entire life. Then he called me by his endearing nickname. Lily, little princess, come help me flip the cake. I jumped off the sofa, left the stuffed bunny behind and rushed towards the kitchen, where my father, the cake shovel, and my whole peaceful world were waiting. But then, everything suddenly stopped. The cake shovel clattered to the floor. My father clutched his chest, his face contorted in pain that I couldn't understand at the time. I still clearly remember my mother's screams, the sound of broken glasses, and the sound of an ambulance siren echoing as if from a broken dream. Just a few hours later, my father was no more. When a father leaves your life when you can't even tie your shoes, you don't just lose a loved one, you lose a sense of security. The house then became terrifyingly silent. No more laughter, no more smell of scorched bread, no more gentle hands wiping my tears every time I fall. I couldn't name that loss at the age of 6. I just know that every morning when I wake up, the world becomes a little emptier than the day before. But then, like many other mothers in that situation, my mother tried to continue living. She went to support sessions for single parents, learning how to smile again. And then, during one such meeting, she met a man named Richard. At that time, I was still too young to understand. Sometimes, when one door closes, adults will rush to open another door, hoping to find what was lost. Without realizing it, the child has not yet had time to overcome that pain. And that's how Richard came into my life. A good, kind, patient man, but also the one who marked the beginning of a new family, where I gradually became a supporting character in my own life. Next, I'll tell you about the day Richard first moved into our house, and why, even though he had never done anything wrong, I felt like an outsider. Below is the part 2. When a new man walked into our lives, write according to the agreed outline. The storytelling style is warm, intimate, has clear explanations, specific examples, and ends with a smooth transition to the next section. I still remember the first day Richard walked into our house. He did not knock on the door with noise or force. He came with a gentle smile, slightly sad eyes as if he had experienced loss. Mom introduced him as a support group friend, but just a few months later, he became the new guy in the house, and soon after, my mom's new husband. I was sitting on the steps when he brought his suitcase in. I didn't say anything, just looked at him quietly. He stopped, bent down, held out a bar of chocolate candy and said, "To a brave girl whose father must be very proud." At that time, I did not respond, but I clearly remember his eyes, the eyes of someone who didn't want to replace him, just wanted to accompany him. Richard wasn't trying to take over my father's role. He didn't force me to call him father. He didn't command. He didn't control. He was just present. He was the one who drove me to school when it rained, the one who read me stories when my mother was tired, the one who silently sat next to me on those nights when I still cried and missed my father. And perhaps, if it had stopped there, I would have called him father without the slightest hesitation. But life always has unexpected turns. Just a year after Richard moved in, my mother announced that I was going to have a sibling. I still remember that moment as clearly as if it were imprinted in my memory. Mother sitting on the sofa, her hand on her belly, her face radiant like the early spring sunlight. "You will be a big sister, Lily," my mother exclaimed, waiting for me to embrace the good news as the most wonderful thing in the world. But I can't laugh. It's not because I don't like children, but because somehow I know things from here on out will never be the same again. A new family, a new kid, a new place in my mother's heart when I fear I will no longer hold. And then Tommy was born. A tiny, red, weak boy ... and the center of all eyes in the house. Right now, I'll tell you the exact moment I realized I was no longer a priority in my mother's eyes, and how it changed me. Below is the part 3, baby brother, shattered balance. Write exactly according to the agreed outline. The storytelling style is still warm, intimate, has specific examples, gentle analysis, and a smooth connection to the next part. Tommy was born one summer morning. I remember it was very hot that day, and the hospital was so cold that I shivered in the thin floral dress my mother chose for me to wear. When the nurse carried Tommy out of the delivery room, everyone around clapped and I, crouching behind Richard, not sure what to feel. I am the older sister. I know that. But I'm also an 8-year-old girl who's just learned how to get used to a stepfather. And now I have to learn how to share my mother with a baby who cries all day, sleeps all night, and attracts all eyes. At first, I tried. I really tried. I drew pictures for her, sang lullabies when my mother was tired, and even brought her diaper to the car even though I found it odd and smelly. Mom looked at me, smiled, and said, "You are a great big sister." But those compliments gradually became less frequent, and so did the attention. Mom quit her job to take care of Tommy. "The first years are so important," my mother said, as if I had never had an important childhood. I usually prepare lunch myself, or nothing at all. Mom forgot about extracurricular activities and missed my first musical performance at school. When I reminded her, "I'm hungry," she just glanced at it. "Oh, I'm sorry. I'm busy taking Tommy to the doctor." Then came back with a warm towel and a box of formula. I started learning to be quiet. In every picture I drew at school, there were originally 3 people: mother, me, Richard. Later, there were 4 people: mom, Richard, Tommy, and me in the far corner, smaller, paler. Actually, what makes me saddest is not the fact that my mother loves my younger brother. It's that my mother loved me so much that she forgot that I also need to be loved. Richard was the only one who realized that. He started taking me to martial arts lessons 3 times a week. When I got my yellow belt, he clapped louder than anyone. "My daughter is wonderful," he said. I don't know if he understood what he had saved me from, but those hours with him were what helped me feel like there was still a place for me in this world. But as Tommy grew older, that deviation became more obvious. I was no longer just forgotten. I started being used. And soon, I will tell you about the day my mother asked me to clean Tommy's room, not once, but forever. As if I was born only to serve his little brother. Below is the part 4. The favoritism that became abuse, right according to the agreed outline. The writing style remains warm and familiar, combined with clear examples, subtle emotional analysis, and smooth transitions to the next section. At first, I thought I was just being forgotten. I reassured myself that my mother was just tired, that my brother was still young so he needed more care. I convinced myself that everything would balance out when Tommy learned to walk, talk, and feed himself. But the bias doesn't stop. It grew with Tommy day by day, month by month, and gradually turned into something more toxic, a type of emotional abuse that no one names. When Tommy was 4 years old, his room was always messy. Toys were scattered everywhere, clothes were strewn everywhere, like a small storm had just passed. One afternoon, while I was doing my math homework at the dinner table, my mother walked in, sighed and said in a monotone voice as if it were obvious, "Let me clean up your room. Mom is busy cooking dinner." I looked up, a bit confused. "But that's your room, right?" Mom didn't look at me. "She's still young. I'm your sister. How about a little help?" I think that day was an exception. But then it became the norm. Tommy throws things, I clean up. Tommy drew graffiti on the wall, I cleaned it. Tommy refused to wear his uniform, and I was blamed for not having prepared clothes. Richard finally spoke up. One time, when he saw me quietly folding my sister's clothes instead of doing a presentation, he asked, "Lily, is this a lesson you chose to do yourself?" I bowed my head. "No, Mom told me to do it." That same evening, I heard an argument in the kitchen. "She is not a maid," Richard said. "It just helped her a little." Mother shouted, "A little bit. Sarah, you're carrying this whole house." I sat on the stairs, my back pressed against the wall, my heart pounding as I heard an argument that I was never a part of, just the cause. After that time, Richard tried to change everything. He spent more time with me, asking about school, picking me up from martial arts class, always praising me every time I tried. And I, in my heart, began to understand. Not everyone will love you the right way, but that doesn't mean you don't deserve to be loved. However, the love of one person cannot overcome the blindness of an entire family. And when Richard suggested playing baseball for Tommy, something to help him get outside, socialize, and grow, everything exploded. Right now, I will tell about the biggest argument between my mother and Richard, the moment that marked the irreparable rift in our house. Below is the part 5. A quiet hero. Richard's silent fight, right exactly according to the agreed outline. The tone continues to maintain a warm, gentle, and close storytelling style. The content has clear explanations, vivid real-life examples, and ends with a smooth transition to the next section. Not all heroes wear capes. Some just quietly pour more milk into your glass, leave your favorite piece of lasagna for last, or pull the blanket over you in the middle of the night without waking you up. That's Richard. He never spoke much, and perhaps that's why many people didn't pay attention to him. But I know he heard every sigh I swallowed. I know he notices every time I try to smile while my eyes are different. And I know he tried very hard to give me little pieces of the childhood I could have had. I remember one night, I had just finished a math assignment that was so difficult that I almost cried. Richard sat down next to me, didn't say anything, just quietly took a pen and started solving the problem step by step. When I asked, "You're really good. How do you know how to do that?" He just smiled and winked, I was the boy. No one thought he could understand math until someone believed he could. That sentence stayed with me longer than any formula. Richard was also the first person to tell my mother that Tommy it needs impact, Sarah, he said one dinner when Tommy cried because his mother couldn't feed him. He needs to know the world doesn't revolve around him. But those efforts often end in anger. You are not his father. Mom screamed once. Richard just kept silent. Not because he was wrong, but because he knew. Sometimes saying the right thing doesn't make things better. I clearly see that over time, he becomes more tired. Smile less. Less interference. Not because he abandoned me, but because he was exhausted from trying to save a family that was drowning itself. But even when he stopped arguing with my mother, he was still the only person who didn't forget my birthday. The one who brought me to martial arts classes regularly. The one who wrote good luck cards on big test days. In a world where I was always on the sidelines, Richard was the only person. Then came the day I graduated from high school. In the moment I stood in the crowd, wearing my graduation scarf, my eyes searched and found Richard waving, smiling brightly as if he had just seen the sunrise after a long winter. Right now, I'll tell you about the greatest gift he left me before he walked out of my life, and why it forever changed my direction. Below is the part 6. Choosing freedom over family expectations, written exactly according to the agreed outline. The writing tone still maintains a gentle, warm, and intimate storytelling style, with clear explanations, real-life examples, and natural transitions to the next section. Graduating high school, for many people, is just a normal milestone. For me, it was the ticket to escape the supporting role in my own life story. I remember the moment I stood in the middle of the schoolyard in my crimson robe, holding my diploma, and my eyes scanned the crowd to find a single person. Not Mom. It's Richard. He stood there, his eyes shining like sunshine after the rain, and I knew he was proud. That evening, he called me into his office, the small room always filled with the smell of paper and painted wood. He placed a thick file in front of me and said, "I saved it. You can choose any school you want. Sky's the limit, Lily." I couldn't hold back my tears. Not because you gave me money, but because you gave it to me choice, something that I have not had in this house for many years. But at that moment, my mother walked in. Within seconds of seeing the file, her expression immediately changed. "You can't be serious." Mother was stunned. That money should be saved for Tommy. He needs it more. Richard looked up at her, not angry, not harsh, just determined. "No, Sarah, this is my decision, and I will not let her be abandoned again." That was the first and only time I saw my mother lose a confrontation. She withdrew, but could not hide her discomfort. As for me, I know I can't live my life just to please others anymore. I chose Marshall University in West Virginia. Not too far to be considered an escape, but far enough to breathe. The day I packed my luggage, Richard drove me, his hands holding the steering wheel tightly the whole way as if he was holding on to something he didn't want to let go. "Mom won't go. She said Tommy couldn't stand being without her." I wasn't surprised, nor was I as sad as I thought. The dorm was small, the room was simple. But my first night there, I slept better than any other night in the past few years. I thought I had entered a completely new chapter. But life still hasn't let me out of the shadow of my family, especially when Tommy started to slide downhill, and my mother tried everything to pull me back into the life I was trying to escape. Next, I'll tell you about the calls from home, the times Richard tried to keep the family together, and Mom continued to do what she always did best: protect Tommy, even at the cost of the collapse of everything else. Below is the part 7, Success versus Stagnation, the split path of two siblings, right exactly according to the agreed outline. The style remains warm, approachable, has clear explanations, real-life examples, and ends with a smooth transition to the next section. Tommy and I grew up in the same house. listening to my mother's lullabies together, smelling the smell of pancakes on Sunday mornings, although less and less. But just a few years later, we were on two completely different paths. I studied day and night in my small dormitory. Breakfast is a sandwich I packed myself. Just instant noodles to save money on books and tuition. But with each exam that passed, each time he got in each time Richard called just to say, "I'm so proud. I know I'm moving forward, even though the road is bumpy and lonely." Meanwhile, Tommy stayed in his mother's comfort zone. You don't go to college. Doesn't work. There were only games, bad friends, and late-night drinking sessions, always covered by mother's repeated statements. It's going through a difficult period. Not everyone finds their way as early as you, Lily. Richard tries. He offered Tommy a job at his construction company, a simple starter job to learn responsibility. Mother dismissed. He's too smart to work with his hands. He was born to work creatively. I had hoped that Tommy would soon realize he was lost. But every time I come home to visit, I only see her sitting in front of the screen, her eyes lifeless, food scattered, and not even saying hello when I walk through the door. One time, I invited her to lunch. "I invited you." I don't answer. Just press the pause button and continue playing. As time went on, the contrast between the two of us became so clear that it didn't need to be said. I have a stable job, started saving for my first apartment. Tommy remained at home, living on his mother's money and later, mine. It's not because I'm better. But for me, don't be pampered to the point of losing the ability to stand on your own defeat. Then one day, all my efforts were wrapped up in one Saturday afternoon, the day I officially received the keys to my first apartment. I called home, inviting everyone to a small housewarming party. Richard was very excited. But Mother used a familiar excuse. "Tommy has a plan, baby." Next, I will tell you about that evening, a cozy meal with just the two of us. And the story Richard told me made me understand that sometimes the distance between two brothers does not come from choice, but from the way adults create two different realities for each child. Below is the part 8. The inheritance betrayal that broke everything, right according to the agreed outline. Keep the storytelling style light and intimate, have real-life examples, clear emotional analysis, and natural transitions to the next section. Richard died on a day no one was prepared for. A sudden heart attack while he was inspecting the project, just like how my biological father left last year. History repeats itself, but this time, I am no longer a 6-year-old child confused by an adult's panic attack. I'm a grown woman, and I see everything clearly, even the things my mother tried to hide behind her tears. Richard's funeral took place quietly. I sat there in the front row, clutching the memorial book. Tommy was wearing wrinkled khaki pants, an untucked t-shirt, and his eyes glued to his phone. Mom cried as if Richard was the greatest love of her life, the person who, over the years, she had often hurt with words. When the guests left, my mother said to me in a soft voice, "Can you stay tonight? Mom wants to discuss something tomorrow." I nodded, not expecting that to be the conversation that would end everything between me and her. The next morning, I walked into the kitchen and saw my mother folding papers in a plastic cover. She pushed it towards me. "This is the new will." I opened it, read it again and again, hoping I was mistaken. House. Savings account. Richard's company shares left behind. Everything is transferred to Tommy. Not a single line mentioned me. I looked up, my voice shaking. "Mom, why?" She did not avoid it. No beating around the bush. Just straight up, because Tommy needs more. He's weaker. He's not like you. I laugh. Not for fun, but because in the end, I heard what I had feared for many years was true. I have never been a priority. I tried to keep my voice calm. "Mom, you know I'm the one who's sending $1,500 home every month to help with living expenses, right?" She just nodded silently. "And I'm the one who paid for house repairs, hired a nurse to take care of mom when she broke her leg, took care of tech gifts, and shouldered the electricity and water bill in December. Do you remember? But you have the ability. The answer was so simple that it left me dumbfounded. It's not just a will. It is an assertion that love in this house not divided equally. And the person who gives the most is the one who doesn't deserve to keep anything. I stood up, leaving the kitchen table where I had learned to write and had breakfast with Richard. This time, I didn't shed tears. No screaming. Don't ask why. I just let go. Right now, I'll tell you what happened next when I did something I'd never dared to do for many years. Stopped sending money home and started choosing my own life. Below is the part 9. The moment I chose myself, write exactly according to the agreed outline. The storytelling style remains warm, intimate, with clear explanations, vivid real-life examples, and a gentle transition to the end. I remember that day clearly, the day I sat on the sofa in my small apartment, staring at my phone screen, where the banking app displayed the familiar words. $1,500 scheduled for transfer tomorrow. That number is not just money. It's proof of every hope I've ever held. That if I was patient, she would change. That if I helped, she would take note. That if I am kind, I will be loved. I let my finger hover over the button cancel recurring payment. And then I remember my mother's eyes when she said, because Tommy needs it more. I remember Candy Tommy's girlfriend sitting leisurely and eating the cookies I brought home, then said, this house is Tommy's now. I took a deep breath, not because of anger, but because of pain. And then I pressed, transaction canceled successfully. It's strange. I think I'll feel guilty. But no, I feel relieved. The next week, I started doing something I had never done before. Learn to invest. I took the money I sent back, opened a new savings account, and named it Lily's House. Not Mom's house. Not my brother's house. Not responsibility or obligation. Just my home where I would feel safe for the first time in a real way. The calls from Mother started coming like showers. The bank had an error. Why haven't I received money this month? I can't do this. I once woke up in the middle of the night just because I thought my mother was sad. But now, I put the phone down. I slept well. Tommy texted, Mom cries all the time. I don't believe you are such a cold-blooded person. I don't answer. Candy sent a long message on LinkedIn saying I was destroying the family. I clicked block. The feeling of being accused, of being tormented, of being emotionally controlled, it gradually disappeared. And in the empty space that guilt once occupied, I began to build new things, a home buying plan, a vacation I've never allowed myself to take, a cooking course that I have been cherishing all year. And then one morning, I drove past a construction site. There is a large sign hanging at the gate, now hiring, nitrogen monoxide experience needed. I almost laughed. I had wished that for Tommy. Now, I just hit the gas and kept driving. Soon, I will share with you the end of this journey and why, after all these years, I can say something I never dared to believe. I am truly free. Below is the part 10. Peace, growth, and letting go, written according to the agreed outline. Maintaining a warm, approachable narrative voice. Combining clear real-life examples, subtle emotional explanations, and a profound, inspirational ending. It has been 6 months since I chose to press the cancel transfer button. 6 months without any midnight text messages, pleading calls, or insinuating comments on social networks. And in that silence, for the first time in my life, I heard the most important thing, the sound of my heart. I start every day with the little things that I used to miss because I was busy living for others. A cup of slow-brewed coffee early in the morning. A gentle jazz song while reading a book. A scented candle placed on the windowsill just because I like lavender scent. No one asked me if I had cleaned your room yet. No one reminded me to help Mom with something. No one told me to sacrifice because my youngest child is still weak. and that absence became the most precious gift I have ever received. As for Mom and Tommy, I don't know how they are. I no longer ask. No more watching. No longer live in expectation that one day they will understand. Maybe they're still waiting for me to call back. Maybe they found someone else to rely on. Maybe they still believe I'm the one in the wrong. And I learned something important. Peace does not come from changing others, but until you stop trying to change them. The Lily House savings account is now more than half full. I'm looking at quiet neighborhoods with lots of trees, a small house with a wooden porch where I can plant a few daisies, raise a dog, and bake pancakes on Sunday mornings. Recently, I dreamed about my father again. In the dream, he stood in the kitchen, holding the familiar shovel and turning the cake, turned around and smiled, "Lily, little princess." Very good. I woke up with a smile. Not because I had everything, but because I finally did choose yourself and live true to what you deserve. And if you, the person watching this video, have also ever felt like you are not enough, ever hoped that someone would love you the right way, ever thought that love must be exchanged for sacrifice, then remember, you don't have to live a supporting role in someone else's story. You have the right to rewrite the next chapter. And this time, you are the main character. Thank you for listening to my story. See you soon on your journey of growth, healing, and true freedom.